we now come to the most exciting part of the day, which is not about technology, AI, white collar, etc. We are talking about the fun part of the economy, which is the creator economy. This business did not even exist 5 years ago or 10 years ago, definitely not 10 years ago. Today we have a whole host of content creators across the board who are able to directly connect with their audiences, and not just connect with their audiences, but even monetize it. We have people who have been professional journalists, people who have been professional CEOs, have given up their day jobs to become content creators, influencers, etc. And joining us today in this panel, which is a very fun panel, is Rohan Joshi, influencer, comedian, co-founder, All India Bakchod.
Hello.
Advait Gupt, co-founder, CEO, Kulfi Collective.
Hi.
Varun Dugirala, podcaster, content creator, and founder of The Glitch. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, there was a time when, content, whether it was entertainment or information, it was centralized. There was a certain set of people who, in their wisdom, created content, and all that we had a choice of consuming it or not consuming it. I think with the internet, the proliferation of internet and social media platforms like YouTube and Instagram, you have a new opportunity and a platform that anybody can use to put their content out there. And if numbers are interesting to people, last year in 2022, YouTube paid $60 billion to create the creators. I'll come to that. Why you people are wondering what happened is because the YouTube has way too many creators on it. So that's one of the reasons, and we'll discuss that in times to come. I'm going to toss the first question to Rohan. How easy or hard it is to monetize today? If you can talk about, content creation, how do you identify and beat the monetization part? Because there are multiple ways to monetize today: subscription, donation, the platforms paying you, ad revenues, etc. So how easy is it to monetize?
It's easy. So it's I think, two-pronged question, and also given that you all do the same thing, please feel free to jump in. It's easy to get access to monetization tools. That has never been easier historically, right? Where today, like you said, earlier it used to be a centralized bunch of specialists. Now today it's this Gutenberg Bible moment where anybody can publish. So anybody has access to monetization tools. How easy is it to make a lot of money? Not easy at all. Same as any other business, you have to work really hard. You have to attain popularity, and then in a very algorithmically driven world, maintain popularity, which is a really hard part, because I think what anybody has seen is that the second you stop posting, the algorithm sort of spits you out of the mill and to the side, and then you have to sort of build up again from scratch. And this is obviously a business where it's sort of like cars on the road. There's just millions coming on every single day, attempting to take your spot, to take what you're doing, all of that. So it's not easy at all, because you're dealing with, like you said, a lot of new types of monetization, but the algorithm is also constantly recontextualizing how to make the most out of that monetization. Today it's Reels. Tomorrow it'll be something else. Today it is specifically this song on Reels. Today, so it's a mix of, you have to be topical, you have to be popular, you have to be regular, you have to, it's exhausting. Like, it really is. I know that's not the most optimistic start, but it's exhausting. It can be tough. You have to work constantly, and super chat, subscriptions, all of that is one thing, but you have to, like traditional businesses, engage constantly with brands and look at other outside sources of money as well, right, in my opinion, yeah.
Right. Advait, why don't you talk a little bit about what is it that audiences want? What is it that they are looking for? Because everybody wants to go viral, but what is it that will go viral? Does one really know?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a clear answer to that. And oftentimes, I think, like Rohan was mentioning, it's driven by the algorithm to a large extent. And there are challenges in the way in which social media platforms have also evolved to try and sort of focus on certain kinds of topics that tend to have, some sort of a viral quotient, but that is typically more polarized, in a lot of ways. So if you have a very strong view about something that can evoke a very strong emotion, there is a likelihood that it could go viral, but that's not naturally the kind of content that maybe a content creator might always want to create. So there are some challenges with regards to how things play out there. I think there are two parts to that as well, that question, right? I think one is what the audience wants, and the second is what the algorithm wants. And they are actually naturally different things. What the algorithm wants is for consumers to spend more time on the platform, right? And that may not necessarily be what the audience wants, right? So I think that's different. Audiences today are becoming a lot more discerning because we're just so much more, like, we're just bombarded with so much information now. So there's obviously a lot of choice, but we're also sort of in like a world where having a healthy media diet is becoming a little bit of a challenge, right? So we're trying to sort of figure out how, as consumers, trying to figure out how do we find that balance. Kind of like the food space in some senses, like, you can order your biscuits and cookies in less than 10 minutes and manage to get like a whole bunch of fast food, but then how are you actually sort of consuming your daily diet, right? And that's, I think, somewhat similar in what's happening in the media space as well.
Everybody wants to be a podcaster now. And, everybody or anybody who has a voice and have an opinion want to basically start podcasting. How easy or difficult is it? And what are the kind of things that seem to be working with audiences? If you could kind of pepper it with examples, that'll be great.
So, podcasting is one of the easiest forms to get into. It's really tough to scale and make any form of regular revenue out of. It's easy because unlike anything which is primarily video, all you need is literally an earphone. You don't even need a mic. You can just get a wired pair of earphones and a phone and you can make a podcast today. And you also don't have as much pressure of, okay, am I setting the camera right? Am I doing lighting? And you're not, and it's not as, doesn't need as much structure as, let's say, a video does, right? Because on YouTube, you're thinking about, okay, how do you grab attention first couple of seconds? Podcast, you can kind of do that. That being said, what podcasting and audio-only podcasting struggles with is to really say, how do I get discovered and how do I make people come back to me again and again? And interestingly, the solution for that has become video. So most, I would say, taking fiction podcasts aside, most non-fiction podcasts now are becoming more and more video. Like I've started off as an audio-only podcast about 4 years ago. Now I'm primarily video as a podcaster. For me, like audio is something which is an extra distribution medium for me. Video is my primary medium because YouTube gives me a lot more access to data, gives me access to understanding my audience. Also can structure it right to kind of build that whole thing out. I can also, promote my podcast through YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, all that stuff. So I have a very clear way to look at it like a media network would if I'm video first as a podcaster. If I'm audio first, the tools necessarily aren't there yet. I know Spotify is trying to build that whole thing out. A bunch of others have tried that. But the problem is that the actual revenue you would make per listener is far lower than what you would make per viewer on video. So that's really where podcasting is really going now. And you're seeing YouTube also invest heavily into podcasts and get into that space. So if you're a podcaster today, it's easy to get in. You can start off, you can build it. It's the lowest denominator to kind of build. Like you can do a 1 hour podcast with just you and your phone or you and your webcam. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. But how do you kind of build that structure out is the question.
Right. Rohan, there's one question I have is, today you can put out something, but given that, the cancel culture, the boycott gang, if I may say so, there is always a risk even in humor. How do you deal with that? When you're creating content, do you kind of run it past lawyers or wonder that will this, kind of offend somebody and will I...
Just constant high supply of anti-anxiety medication. That's the answer. It's just, I don't think you can put out content and not be stressed out. And it's not necessarily just about, cancel culture, boycott, etc., all of that. I think it's just about you are putting something out onto a space where everybody can give you instant and immediate feedback, right? And like we talked about, we don't know what goes viral, we don't know anything. In that same way, a feedback comment can also go viral, whether it's good, bad, correct, wrong, right? So I think sort of like a lot of jobs where you sort of, which involve introducing your baby to the world and are external facing, it just comes with a sort of high supply of anxiety. And then the only other way to do it is, I guess, you learn from experience. Like you get knocked on your ass a couple of times and you go, okay, maybe I'm not going down that road again. Or you sort of see what to do and when to do it. And yeah, it's very case by case, because like he said also, you don't know what's going to set people off, right? In a good way and in a bad way. Like something that you didn't even consider will just come out of left field and annoy somebody, and something that you didn't think was going to like strike a good chord with people will take off, and people will be like, this is the best thing this person has done. So I've just given up on the prediction game entire. I don't know you, I'm just like, you know what will happen will happen. I don't claim to understand this jungle anymore.
But do you want to give specific examples where something didn't work and you were taken aback and like, oh my God, what happened?
No, not specific examples, but like for example, I can go through my Reels category right now and tell you that there are jokes that I loved. And when I put out there, I'm like, I'm sure everyone's going to love these. And then you see it's got like 4,000 views. And then some really forced joke that I thought 4 times about putting out has gone to like 1 million views, right? So there's times where you're just like looking at your audience and you're weeping. You're like, what do you want? Tell me, what do you want? Why won't you just explain?
Don't deprive our audience of that 1 million worth joke. Please share. What
Yeah.
was it that worked?
No, it was literally like, what was it? It was something stupid. Like, yeah, it was just a reel about how I'm the only person that wakes up early on a boys' trip. That's it. And it's not even a joke. I'm just sitting alone in my room. And people are like, oh my God, what most max relatable. Main bhi jaldi utta hu, akele coffee peeta hu. And you're just like, what a baseline thing for people to find like relatable. And there's other jokes like where I'll be like, oh, this is wordplay I'm doing. And mera craft dekho yahan. And they'll be like, nahi dekhne ka hai. Coffee pee. Usme maza aata tha. Like it's crazy, right? Because I feel like everything's become a relatability game also. Like, do you find this?
Has any
right?
coffee company come and asked you to endorse them?
That is the hope and the dream. Now, that is what I'm working towards. Because if you want a hobby where you'll spend all your money, I would recommend either music or coffee. Both great hobbies to spend your money.
Okay,
Yeah.
super.
100%.
Advait, what about content? Companies today do not want to take the path of conventional advertising. They want narratives, they want stories, they want conversational ways of putting their point, product, placement, etc. What about that? Is that again an opportunity for creators?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is an opportunity, and I think that, like, I mean, to Rohan's point, right? It's. I think it boils down to the creator trying to sort of choose what they think works for them, because it's really, really hard to predict what their audience really wants. I mean, there are ways where you build out communities and you engage with those communities, and you can sort of go down, that rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, I think it's decided by the creator, and I think brands also obviously have their values and they have their, their strategy and their objectives in terms of what they want to appeal to and what kind of an audience they want to talk to. So there is an opportunity to build out that narrative. And yes, going back to the earlier point of how audiences are, they are becoming discerning. So you cannot shove content down their throats and say, watch this, or it cannot be a 30-second spot in between, the match that you're watching or anything else. So at the end of the day, they are pulling the content that they want to watch, and brands and organizations and institutions need to think about it in that way. And what is that kind of voice they want to have, much like how creators are. So I think it's interesting because we're in this time where brands and consumer brands more specifically are becoming a lot more like creators. Like they have the ability to start thinking like creators. And we're also seeing creators to some extent starting to think a little bit like brands, because once they sort of acquire that following, once they have the ability to productize and maybe even scale, they are starting to sort of think a little bit like brands themselves as well. So that convergence is starting to happen as we speak.
I did mention a very big headline figure, which is $60 billion by YouTube. But if you calculate the per user revenue, it is the lowest for YouTube, and it's the highest for Substack, which has a very small number of creators on it, but the revenues are very high. Of course, it's another matter that people like Salman Rushdie and Patti Smith are on Substack creating content. But what about platforms? Which are the platforms that are easiest to monetize? And I think all three of you should take a shot at this one.
I think it's YouTube. Like at least for the sort of comedic space and the long form like entertainment space where you want to like engage an audience for an hour, I think it's YouTube just because of the range of monetization tools they offer to you as a creator and also to your audience. I can choose to pay nothing and just watch an ad, and the ad that I've watched eventually translates into ad revenue for the creator. I can choose to become a member on this person's channel and essentially pay a monthly subscription like I would to Netflix or whatever. I can be like, I will sign up and I will pay $50 a month to Varun's channel, and for that I will get access to all podcasts a week early. I can be watching a video by Varun and be like, I'm just really enjoying this. I'm going to send him 500 rupees on Super Chat right now, of which YouTube will then keep a small percentage and then eventually pay that out towards a creator. There's super thanks. There's just this variety of you can get paid a couple of cents per view to just tons of money. Like there have been times I've been part of streams where I've seen like eyebrow raising super chats, where people are essentially just paying to sort of have their chat read out first, or wanting to be visible, to do all of those things. So I actually find YouTube is the one that I always recommend to people. I find Instagram to be exhausting to monetize, like unless you directly work with the brand and sort of get paid by that. YouTube is the sort of thing where you can physically monetize your actual work easier than anywhere else. And while yes, there are a lot of creators, some who make next to nothing, there are some that make a lot of money, right? Because it's like any other system. Today, for just because one Ranveer Singh is successful, should everybody else in Warsaw go home? Like, no, right? You'll still struggle, you'll still work, you'll still try to make your shot, you'll still try to do that. So I think that is definitely like a thing.
I think I look at it a little differently. I see platforms as exactly that, platforms. So they're more of an opportunity to be discovered as opposed to monetized, right? So I think what has happened, going back to your original question with regards to distribution, we've reached a stage where theoretically speaking, the speed at which you can acquire distribution is very high, right? You can get 1 million views in a few minutes or a few days, right? Whereas it would take much longer, 2 decades ago to be able to get that kind of reach unless you were a large media organization or a channel. So I think the way we look at platforms is more like a distribution tool as opposed to a monetization tool. And what's increasingly happening is creators are getting creative about ways in which they can effectively monetize, right? So, like if you take, Akshat Srivastava, he's a well-known finance creator. If you take his journey, he's sort of gone ahead and built out an educational product and is funneling people to that product, right? And that's a completely independent solution outside of even a Substack-like or a Patreon-like solution, right? And I think that that's basically the future that we're moving towards, where you'll see creators increasingly starting to build out their own products, digital or physical, which will actually be where the true value or monetization may happen. Obviously, this will be a threat to some of these platforms, so they will start building out features and solutions, which is great for the creator, hopefully. But I think that at least increasingly we are seeing that kind of a transition happen as we move forward.
I'd say, a mixture of both. They both said is that YouTube is, if you want to monetize as a creator, start with YouTube. And it's a holy grail, right? I know creators who have millions of followers on Instagram who are excited when they get 10,000 subscribers on YouTube because they know that's long-standing. Because once a video is on YouTube, you make money forever. Because as people go back to videos of creators who made something like 5-6 years ago and they still make some amount of money off that. But in the long term, if you are a creator today, you got to start functioning like a media business. I started my career in television as a producer. YouTube is TV. You just get to own your channel, look at your data, create your shows. But the products that are part of it are products you can own and create yourself. And that's really the future, right? And that's like you said, like you can create digital products, you can create physical products. You can build an entire system where your marketing is taken care of by your free content. You're not even going after any other form of marketing. And I think that's really the future of monetization for creators, that you literally function like a media network, all the systems exactly what you have in terms of large scale production, etc. And that's how you make money. But all the other platforms, it's less the platform and more brands figuring a way to connect with creators. So on Instagram, for instance, it'll never be through Instagram. Someone will go through, let's say, an influencer agency or someone's manager and come through to you. And then you negotiate and do that stuff. But I agree, it's exhausting because there it's the algorithm driving your content to people. Whereas on YouTube, it's still about, okay, I follow you for your content, so I will keep going back to seeing what you uploaded next.
Interesting. What about, sorry,
Sorry,
please.
may I just throw a quick anecdote onto what they said to just sum up how wild and weird this world is, all right? I was at a conference recently, and these guys were showing some YouTube data, and they showed the sort of trends for one video, all right? And it legit looks like a heartbeat. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And they're like, do you guys know what video this is? All right, and everybody, threw out all sorts of answers. Where, and the answers ranged from, is it some weekend this thing to, is it the azan on Fridays or is it what, etc. Where people literally, these were the answers. And the guy pointed out and he revealed the answer and he said, it's actually Rebecca Black's song Friday. You know, the one that everybody made fun of her for when it came out, Friday, Friday. Even today, on Friday evenings, what happens is we all get drunk. We all go to a party, we all get drunk, and someone goes, guys, you know what would be amazing? If we play Rebecca Black's Friday. And so even today, years after the internet literally bullied her, mocked her, this, that, Rebecca Black still making money every Friday from that song because it get millions of views from people who got drunk and said, let's play Rebecca Black's Friday.
Like, have you seen those videos of people streaming themselves studying with music?
Yeah.
So before exams, what you see a spike in is someone just puts a camera on themselves, they're studying for their exams, and they just put a playlist of music and playing in the background. And there are thousands and thousands, if not more than thousands of people just watching that and studying along because they're like, you're giving me a playlist and I feel like I'm studying with other people, but just having my laptop open and YouTube on. And they make money off that.
I was about to ask, what kind of content is like gets cult following, and
I'll tell you, I've been a
okay.
content creator for over a decade now. Some of my best friends who claim to support me, love me, etc., all of that. My best friend in the world, all right, I'm a content creator. I make meme reaction videos. I go out there, I bust my ass. You know what he watches for 2 hours every night before he falls asleep? Videos of dogs sleeping. This is what you're competing with, all right? I'm not competing with Mismatched on Netflix. I'm competing with 2 hours of a dog sleeping. This is what is content today, all right? Like, if on one side, it's literally a video of a guy studying for 3 hours. On the other side, it's a dog sleeping for 2 hours. And somewhere in the middle is me saying, bhai, meme dekhoge? So it's chaotic.
Yeah, I think a good chunk of that 60 billion is going to that.
Yeah, that one dog. That one dog, I'm telling you, it's wild.
But you know,
I have an admission during the pandemic. That is what I used to do every night. But dog trainer, very good dog trainer.
There we go.
Yeah.
But YouTube actually did a study a while back. I think this was about 6 odd months ago, because everybody perceived that short form content was where things were going, right? And YouTube study said that actually with younger audiences, long form is actually far higher and it's growing. And so there are 3 kinds of content really driving that. One was really long video essays, like someone's done like a 1 hour, 2 hour video, like on a very specific topic, right? It could be about how do you make, just my personal rabbit hole is like, how do automatic watches work, history of a certain watch factory, how that was made, what is the internal movement, gear shafts, all that stuff. That's my personal like late night dog sleeping video for me. Is
We've all got one of those.
How a watch is made. So that kind of stuff, but across all subjects. Could be career focus, could be just interests and stuff like that. The second kind was communities, which is basically, I'm a fan of a certain kind of, let's say I'm for lack of a broader example, a Marvel or a DC fan, or I'm an anime fan. If there are videos talking about, oh, this is something I discovered about this, or it's that kind of content that has driven a lot of long form content. The third is that short form content is making people watch more long form content. So if I take a small part of a podcast and put it out there, that makes people come and watch my long form as well. So it's that whole nexus of what works is so interesting to think about, because that's not what you perceive to be the big videos you watch on YouTube, but those are the 3, according to YouTube, that are driving more engagement.
I'm going to deviate from the business of content creation to something that is bothering me ever since I saw this Netflix documentary on Hunter Moore and Is Anyone Up, right? What are the chances of a risk that because you want instant fame or you really want to go viral, you push the boundaries, whether it's shaming other people or it is creating content that's supremely provocative? What are the risks of that as a creator, do you feel tempted to push the boundary at times just because, you want to check what works, and at the same time, what is it that people want?
Me personally, not so much, just because I think I'm just past
Not
that point
personally.
of like provocation for the sake of provocation.
No,
But
I'm
I
talking
think
about
like
the ecosystem.
I think that'll happen in any ecosystem, right? Because today this has been true of TV, movies, is that there will always be somebody who will want to sort of push the boundary, sometimes cynically just to get noticed, and sometimes because for their art. So I feel like that's the thing that'll happen. I think it's not a risk. I think it's something that happens on a day-to-day basis. We've all been talking about the very civilized parts of the internet over the course of this discussion. We haven't even gotten into Reddit and 4chan and any of that stuff where and it's this bizarre, almost dystopian thing where there are people who will like, for example, for me the ultimate cautionary tale is this YouTuber called Nikado Avocado. Was that his name? He was a mukbang YouTuber. Mukbang, again, is one of those very specific subgenres of YouTube, which is just videos of people eating. And sometimes like heroic eating feat, where it's like, I will do 30 spicy burgers in one meal, etc. And this guy started off completely normal. And if you see his journey, it just went to him doing bizarre and dehumanizing things to himself on camera just for views. And it was essentially, you were getting a sort of real-time snapshot into a man's complete sort of mental collapse. And essentially, it was almost gladiatorial with the audience going, more, we want more.
Exactly, that's what I meant.
Of course. Yeah. And people will watch, and people will do, and people will watch, and people will do. And it's a matter, this has happened, no? People have live streamed themselves killing themselves. People have live streamed themselves doing all sorts of things. This is going to happen. The question is, like, do we live in a society where this is going to be more the exception than the rule? I hope so. But you always have to be aware that there is and this is the internet. Like, you have no idea what some of those cameras are looking at. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, talk about regulation. That brings me to the next point of regulation. Should the internet be regulated at all? And I know it flies in the face of what it stood for and it stands for. But the government has come out with influencer norms because it was being kind of misused, and some of them did blow back into influencers who were pitching things like crypto and financial products, etc. Do you think do you think it'll work in the real world? Because will those disclosures work? And what if I'm saying something, what's the difference between my opinion and somebody paying me for it, is number one. And second is that, do we need more regulation like that? What's your view on the influencer regulation to begin with?
As a creator, I'm all for very clearly earmarking ad space. Like, I'm definitely a huge thing of. So I feel like harm as a metric should definitely be, we protect our kids, we protect people from physical abuse and physical harm and all of those things. But in terms of regulating what people say, like recently the Delhi High Court was like, we saw swearing like in a TVF web show and we should censor it. And I'm like, तुम लोग दिल्ली से हो, मतलब क्या बात कर रहे हो? Right? Like today, how are you going to do that? And it's the internet. Stop me if I'm wrong. If you stop it on one platform, people on the internet will find another platform. All right? To the point where Donald Trump got kicked off Twitter and he's like, मैं खुद का platform start करेगा. And then that makes it worse. Because now they've sort of gone into this rat cave which you can't see into and you can't look into and you have no idea what's happening until the sort of thing. So I'm a hard no on like censorship other than anything that causes harm.
So I was part of a group of creators who ASCII actually did an entire a couple of days of discussions with before the regulation came out, right? I think the one piece we forget is we talk about platforms, we talk about creators, but we forget there's the third part to this, which is the brands themselves, right? And thing is, there's a larger responsibility for brands to say, when you give a brief to a creator saying, don't put that hashtag ad. I want this to seem organic. You are then telling the creator to make the choice to be responsible of saying no, right? Because I say no to those because I can, and I'm thankfully in a financial position to say no to that. But a lot of creators aren't. So you say, I want it to seem like a, an organic comment or seem like a post that, you made, but it's not talking about the fact that we paid you to do it. A lot of creators say yes to that because that's the part of the brief. And I feel that's where it goes sideways on a slightly broader level. And I agree on the harm part. I think it's very easy to, if you let the algorithm decide what you create, then you will naturally go after topics that are darker, more polarizing, more harmful. So you got to have an individual gauge saying, this is my line, and this is what I will not cross no matter what. Like one of the things we do on the podcast, and we do that very consciously, is if when a guest says something very controversial, or it's a slip of tongue when they say something, even if make a reference, we take a call saying, do we want that there or do we cut it out? Most times not even asking the guest, because you're like, it's our responsibility about what goes out onto the internet. And you can choose to say, okay, I can use this as my thumbnail, focus all energies there so I get more views. But then what is the price you're paying for that? And I feel that's the creator's choice. The creator's choice is what is the price you're paying for that extra couple of views or this and that. But on the brand front, I feel it's a lot more about the brand to decide what's responsible rather than putting the buck on the creator.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that the guidelines are necessary, and it's good to sort of draw those lines, and it comes from the responsibility of the brand as much as, I mean, the creator is also responsible, but I think the brands need to also take that responsibility because they're the ones who are incentivizing the creator or disincentivizing the creator, if you will, to sort of put that disclaimer out, right? So I think that that's very, very important. And I totally agree on the censorship piece as well. I think that there is a tendency when regulation starts getting introduced, and I have a larger view on a commercial implication as well, there's a tendency when regulation happens to start leaning or over-indexing on regulation, and that sort of builds way too many frictions in the free market in general, right? So I think that this applies to all industries. So going back to crypto or any other industry, the moment you start over-regulating, you're automatically then, killing innovation, you're killing the ability for a free market to operate, and that is obviously going to have its own commercial implications as well.
I completely agree. But what I found very disturbing about this documentary on Is Anyone Up is that they were sourcing intimate images of people through hacking of phones. And there were no federal laws in the US, and you would believe that they are way advanced because, that's where the internet was born, that they would have foreseen some of this to happen. And there were images which were put out of people shaming them, and they refused to take it down. And when they went to when the victims went to FBI, they were told essentially that sorry, but it is through consent. It's through consent, and they said no, but we didn't give consent. There was no way that content could be taken down. And that is the worrying part, because even today, it's only 46 states in the US which have rules on people putting up intimate images and people protesting if they don't want it to be there, whether it's consensual or not. If I don't want it, I have a right to ask for it to be taken down. And yet there is no federal law on that in the US. So is regulation behind is what I mean to say, because it's not just about content, promoting brands, or those have implications. But there is a very dark side to the internet as well. And
No,
how do you deal with that?
So there is a dark side to the internet, but I feel like that we're not into the content creation space here. Now we're into more fundamental issues of consent and property theft, right? This is not like today, this is like traditional content creators are probably not approaching this. Do we need to regulate the overall internet, not the content creation space, but the overall internet for just same basic laws of property theft and consent that apply to everything else? If somebody can't steal your car, they shouldn't be able to steal your photographs without your permission, right? Because at the end of the day, that is your property. It might be intellectual property or digital property, but it is your property. So I feel like that regulation is very, for me, different from like the idea of content regulation. I feel like, for example, there are certain websites, right? While like in principle, I agree. There are some websites that say they're doing a lot, but they don't. Like let's take, for example, pornographic websites, right? Which is, we have to talk about it because one of the hugest pieces of content on the internet, right? Where a lot of websites have policies that are like no revenge porn, right? Where if somebody's put up a video or this thing without somebody's consent or done any of that, we will make sure that there's no space for it outside of children's pornography, etc. And there are some that say it but don't do it. And I agree that there needs to be like a crackdown in that situation.
Exactly.
But there we're getting into straight up issues of property theft and consent, and not of content creation, where it's not about censoring of, oh, is this appropriate or inappropriate. This is where getting straight up into criminality and theft here.
And also, I think a content creator who depends on creating content for their, for making money, will also make a choice where doing stuff like that will actually be negative for them in the long run. So they won't actually do it. This is more like I'm doing it because the internet allows me to do it. But for someone who actually makes content to make money out of, they will, even if they do it at the base raw level, they will still find some nuance to make sure they're safeguarding themselves. And I think this, like I said, it's a whole different, that's the whole internet, that's not the content creation space.
Right, got that. What about metaverse? Metaverse is the next frontier for content creators, is what I seem to understand or I've been told. Any of you have any view on the metaverse?
I don't think so. See, I feel that AR is a space where we've all naturally gone towards because we use filters, use lenses and all that stuff. Are we going to spend our lives with headsets on and not going to the real world? I don't think so. I mean, we had 2 years of that sitting at home. I don't think we want that to be the rest of our lives. So is it going to be a part of it? Yes. And that's what happens when you game. That's what happens when you're sitting on a console. But I don't think it's as big a thing today or even in the next decade as it is been said to be. I think what we've realized more, and that's maybe more personal for me, in the last 2 years is I actually want more physical interactions than I want digital interactions. And I'm seeing so many more people across age groups saying that. So I actually think the flip will happen, is that we will have the metaverse for specific needs. It might be maybe to use in industries, in factories and stuff like that. But I think the actual human experience will have a lot more growth in the years, at least for now.
I think, and this I could be absolutely wrong, but I've tried speaking to a lot of people about this, and where I am right now is it's a big tech marketing hype word. I have not yet met a single person that has been able to define it clearly for me. It at best is a collection of disparate technologies that people are trying to sort of hype into sort of one cohesive thing so they can peg all their sort of marketing and future shareholder plans on. I think people just like saying the word. It just sounds like big tech kicking a can down the road saying metaverse, yeah, aa raha hai na, bahut acha hone wala hai. I don't know that, like he said, I think the thing about the metaverse has already existed. If you've got a PS5 and a great television and a home theater system, you've been living in the metaverse for a long time and interacting with a lot of people. But overall, as it's sort of being hailed and pushed right now, it's not really a thing I see like a gigantic case for. And to add to what he said is, how much time do you actually spend doing a thing concentratedly? I feel like what really makes my phone addictive is the fact that I can use it while doing 100 other things. Versus this metaverse concept where I have to sit down, put this on thing. In an hour or two, I'll be like, ab dinner pe jana hai. Right? Whereas my phone and this AR experience is I can do while doing 100 other things. And I think that is what will always be sticky.
And the hype cycle is said, the hype cycle was metaverse, but now you hear everybody saying OpenAI, AI, right? So you're going to have one hype cycle after the other, and some of those things go into the background. They have to be part of really boring industries for them to be mainstream, has always been my perception.
I feel like more than doing your next conference in the metaverse, your next panel will just be 3 chatbots. I think that's the real fear. Like here, instead of the 3 of us, it's going to be 3 chatbots. Like,
you believe that?
That is, in fact, chatbots scare me way more than the idea of the metaverse does. Because, way, because that is like, I could be redundant day after, right? If this thing is passing the bar exam and literally hiring humans to solve captures because it can't do it itself, I'm way more scared of that than what like a 280p pixelated version of myself in 3D will look like.
You mean to say that people will want to see a chatbot mulling whether it should have coffee or not?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
I mean, people are already having conversations with the chatbot and talking about how, the chatbot was actually talking about how, I don't know if anyone's seen the article of the New York Times reporter who was actually having a conversation with the Bing chatbot, where the Bing chatbot actually started talking about how they were in love with them and how the
and
journalist
that his
should
marriage
actually
was
leave.
not a happy one.
Yes, and it wasn't a happy one. So it is happening, although I have a slightly alternative view to it. I think that it's more a tool, and it will continue to be a tool. So it's going to be, there was a very interesting John Oliver video on AI recently, and there was someone who spoke about this over there, where a lawyer with OpenAI or an AI tool versus a lawyer without the tool is where it's going to actually be the difference. It's not going to be a lawyer versus AI. It's the person who uses the tool. And that's actually how it's worked in a lot of industries, right? I mean, our industry, for instance, content became, film was analog, it moved to digital, and now they're digital tools. There are still far more people in the film industry than there were like 40 years ago. So it's not like as if those jobs are lost and there isn't anybody. I just think that human beings will evolve into using them as tools, and those tools will make them far more competitive and superhuman in some ways. Not the microchip kind of way, but more in terms of just more effective and productive.
And I was talking to someone yesterday, and they brought up something interesting. Two use cases, right? One is that we spend a lot of our time in meetings. There's this one, I forget the name of it. There's something that's been built on top of OpenAI where you can actually send the bot in to attend the meeting on your behalf, summarize everything that happened in it, and you get an entire detailed piece there. Another one was for anybody who's ever read a legal document or a term sheet or any of those pieces. Those are generally quite tough to kind of understand in the initial days. And now there's a version where it will summarize the overall piece. This is what the key points are. These are things to look out for in a matter of seconds, right? Now, if you have a bot doing that, what do you really want to do? You don't want to put on a mask and go into the metaverse. You want to go out with your friends. And I feel that's exactly what will happen, is that all of this will make us actually spend more time out there than actually go deeper into technology.
Right. I did spend last evening chatting with Albert Einstein on character.ai and yeah.
So this is a step down for sure. Right?
No, I don't think so. No. But yes, if I were to ask you people, and we're running out of time, so if I were to ask each of you to
As a panel or as a species? Sorry, just clarifying. Just clarifying.
I thought they were almost asleep. Clearly, I was wrong. No bots for us. No bots for us. You win hands down. And this is the next question, which is essentially that if you were to advise maybe somebody like me, if I have to become a content creator, A, how do I get started? And B, how do I monetize it? To each one of you. It's like basically a kind of hack, if you may.
Well, how do you get started is you just get started. In the sense that you point a camera towards yourself and you start talking. And there has never been a more learn on the job than content creation. There will be a point in your 15th or your 16th video where you will look back and just automatically realize through small tweaks how far you've come since video 1. From just like, oh, you can't see the shadows under my eyes anymore because I know how to put a light now. And I know that I should, even if I have like a simple mic, if I keep it at this distance, I sound good. Versus if I keep it here, I sound really weird. To, this video did better. Oh, what did I talk about in this video that people found interesting? And you just iterate, and you keep doing it. As to how you monetize, if the popularity starts building in places like YouTube, the mountain will come to you.
Advait?
I think, yeah, I agree. I think it's very similar. There is obviously, the tools are available and it's very easy to start. I think it's also a lot of like internalizing it because you question, and I think to Rohan's point in one of the earlier responses that he was making was how much you end up questioning every post that you're putting out, right? And that is also a very, very big part of the creation process because you're constantly iterating and trying to sort of make sure whether this is actually right or not. And I think that ability to be able to sort of break out of that mindset and not prevent yourself from actually putting something out there is also a very big step that especially early stage creators need to take, because I think a large portion of them not taking that first step is like not going to the gym or anything else, right? They just are afraid to take that first step. So I think that easier said than done, but they need to sort of figure out how do they move past their own roadblocks. Monetization, I think, again, there are a bunch of opportunities and platforms. Creators need to start thinking in a way that goes beyond specifically the platform. The platform is a discovery tool. It is not necessarily the monetization tool as well. So if they can start thinking about that, it is useful. Obviously, again, that comes from a certain perspective and an ability which may not necessarily be there right at the offset. But over time, I think that is basically where things are going to move.
At least the initial part of being content creator is a lot more about you building a system for you to kind of create, right? Like both of them said. So you have to start with either an area you have deep expertise in or genuine curiosity in, right? Can you create content on a day-to-day basis with maybe just that two viewers, which is you and maybe your mom, which is generally what for a lot of us it becomes, and then do that for the next 5 years with no expectations of making any money from it, no expectations of do you genuinely enjoy creating it? Because if you don't have that, you will find every reason to stop doing it, right? You should genuinely be able to do that. Can you sit in front of the mic? Like I've been a podcaster since 2018. Wake me up at 3 a.m., ask me to talk into a mic, I will talk into a mic. I just enjoy that too much.
And if you don't wake him up, he'll come to your house and wake you up at 3 a.m. and say, now you talk
I have
in my
messaged
mic.
him at 3 a.m. and said, do you want to talk on a mic? But yes. And
You're his 3 a.m. friend.
I'm his 3 a.m. podcast friend.
yes.
No AI and bot for you either.
No, yeah, and what for me either. And I feel monetization comes to you through when distribution really starts working for you, right? If people genuinely feel that, that you're authentically someone who has this expertise or has this level of curiosity, the content you create will resonate with your tribe. And I always like to say tribe for an audience because, they kind of grows with you. And then the monetization happens. You will build products yourself, you will work with brands, platforms give you money. But in the long term, you can only do it if you start from the simple fact that, do I enjoy doing this? If it made me no money, then you will make money. If on day one you're saying, how will I make money from this? You might not make as much money.
That's a very good piece of advice.
That is.
And I have one more last question to ask. Genuinely, this is the last one. Which is that I discovered Ankur Warikoo during the pandemic. I didn't know who he was. And the ads kept bombarding me every 5 seconds on YouTube. And many of my friends have chosen to go pay because they said we just couldn't handle him popping up on my YouTube
There's
screen.
actually an entire trend on Twitter saying that YouTube might actually owe him a lot of credit for YouTube premium subscriptions.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I genuinely have friends who paid up because they said, dude, can't deal with it anymore. How important it is to advertise or, be out there. In 2 years, he's become a phenomena from 0 revenues to 27 crore. Unbelievable that is. How important is it to advertise? Or promote yourself by paying and spending money, marketing dollars on these platforms?
Advertise your product, don't advertise yourself. Like if you look at Ankur's ads are advertising his course. They're not advertising him. They're not asking you to go to his YouTube channel. They're asking you to go to his learning platform to buy his course. And he actually speaks about this in one of his videos. He says the fact that the whole idea was he never pitches his course on his videos. But what happens is you get so irritated by seeing his ads that you are like, okay, who is this guy? You go to his channel, you'll watch a couple of videos, then maybe you'll subscribe. And if you subscribe and you like his content, then maybe you'll buy his course. And that's the cycle he's worked on, and that's really worked for him. I think that's a smart one, because do I want to advertise? Like, for instance, we use some amount of advertising on some parts of the podcast, because we say, okay, this episode, we treat it like a TV promo, right? If it's out here, sometimes when you feel, okay, this needs to be promoted a little bit. And that's like you function like a media network, saying, I'm just putting a promotional video out for my show. But it's about that. Advertise your product. Don't advertise yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's distribution at the end of the day. I mean, if I have to sell a soap, shampoo, or myself, I need to put it out there. How will people discover me otherwise, right? How important is it?
It's very important in the sense that, and also more than any other medium here is, if you don't promote yourself, no one's going to promote you. There's no hoardings. There's no this thing. You're not like a channel somebody else has to push.
What I'm saying is organic virality possible, or you have to spend
No,
money?
I think organic virality is absolutely possible. Consistency can definitely lead to organic virality, and I think there's tons of creators that are testament to that they don't push. Like, there's lots of creators I can think of that I've never seen a promoted video for, but I follow, and I'm definitely part of their millions and millions of followers. So I think that, in fact, you have to be a little shameless about promoting yourself.
You haven't encountered Dev Gadvi?
I have not encountered Dev Gadvi. But now that you have said Dev Gadvi in the presence of my phone, I am sure within 5 minutes I will encounter Dev Gadvi. I have no doubt about this. Thank you for teaching my phone another thing to advertise to me relentlessly. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, a lot of content creators don't even have the capital to advertise, right? So how are they going to do it? I mean, if you do have the resources available, you might sort of choose it. And to Varun's point, I think you should advertise your product. If you yourself are the product, then, I mean, that's a different story. But essentially, I think, yeah, it boils down to how can you get creative to promote yourself, right? And if you have the money, maybe you aren't so creative, you'll use the money to actually just go and actually inorganically advertise. But if not, you'll find other better solutions to do it. And that's, I think, what a vast majority of creators actually are doing right now.
Just to add one thing, when you say paid promotion, it also means using what, for I'll give an example, there are enough entrepreneurs who have podcasts, right? That is you taking money out of your marketing budget and putting into a podcast budget and using that to kind of get organic reach. So it's technically, I think even that middle ground is actually the most interesting one, where you're not technically putting an ad of yourself, but your show is advertising your company culture, how you as a founder, which means talent will gravitate towards you and so will clients. And I feel that's one, the middle part is the most interesting part.
Content marketing, yeah, essentially.
And with that, I think it's a wrap. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
This wonderful chat. Been absolutely enlightening for people like me, at least. Thank you so much, all three of you.